Hi all. The Chess Olympiad is on the way, the 2016 Chess Olympiad. These are teams of 4, so lots of countries participating. And the game I'm wanting to show you today is Magnus Carlsen game. He's playing for Norway, of course, on board 1. And let me just bring up the results. There's a results and pairings website by Chess Results, an excellent site. Chess Results, they have everything for all major tournaments. So it's actually board 12, virtual board 12, team board 12, Norway against Bangladesh. Magnus Carlsen was playing against, as this shows, Enamul Hossain. He's got his good friend Ludwig Hammer on board 2. He's known since kids. So that's a very strong GM at 26.51. But the Norway team drops off a little bit on board 3 and 4. There's Rg2 25.70 and Rde8 Rg2 25.37. Now bear in mind, you know, there are many teams that actually have, well, there's a few that have 4 players basically over 2700. If you check the Russian team, they're all over 2700. So Norway's not like the favourites, but it's got a star player obviously in the form of Magnus Carlsen. So let's have a look at this game. So this is a very interesting game because Magnus starts off interestingly with E3, and there's an article on Wiki about this. It's the Van Cruz's opening. I hope that's close anyway. It's Dutch, named after a Dutch Amsterdam player, Martin Van Cruz, 1813 to 85. So it's an unusual start move. Van Cruz, for trivia, he won the 6th Dutch Championship in 1878. Okay, so it's not considered like one of the strongest, but its transpositional possibilities are immense. And in fact, Kasparov used this move to get Fritz immediately out of his book. But on the other hand, if it did have transposition, it would know it later. It usually will hit main openings if you play moves normally after this. And in fact, the opponent, Enamul Hossain, plays knight f6, we have knight f3, and we go into a variation of the Nimzo engine, a pretty standard variation of the Nimzo engine here. Bishop d3, we have knight e4, and now Magnus is not afraid of just castling here. And the reason I say this is because actually there's quite a big potential forcing sequence in this position coming up. Black actually played bishop takes c3 here, and now, okay, b takes c3. Black actually just castled here, but it's not entirely bad to actually take on c3. There's quite a bit of theory here. One assumes that Enamul Hossain is aware of this, but actually, you know, knight takes c3 isn't entirely as bad as you might imagine. Black castled, but let's have a quick look. It's a very interesting bit of theory. Queen c2 seems to trap the knight, but Black plays bishop takes f3, and you might think, isn't the knight still trapped? No, because after g takes, it's not good to play queen takes because there's queen g5, and Black's actually better all of a sudden. This position is clearly is better for Black, but if we go back here, so g takes allows this check, and this is where White has to tread carefully to avoid getting into another perpetual check. Here, rook g1 to stop the multiple checks on f3 and g4 if he takes the knight. We've got a perpetual check here. So White has to tread carefully with rook g1 instead of taking the knight, delaying taking that knight. We get this position where, again, you can't take the knight because there's another perpetual check scenario here. So white has to again tread carefully. And actually, engine likes bishop a3. I think bishop b2 has been played quite a bit, but bishop a3 is an engine choice. And it's very hard actually to extract an advantage from this position. On bishop b2, this is why it might actually have been interesting for black to play this to test Magnus Carlsen. Because after knight e4, yeah, the knight's been given that e4 square with f5. And the position is actually difficult to crack. Here, black's actually not doing too badly here. So my own investigation with bishop a3, top Houdini choice, and this position, again, it's not entirely brilliant for white. You can think white's going to try and open up lines, but black's pretty solid. The idea of queen f6 here, it's only a fractional advantage or nothing. It turns out to be not much at all here after f4. Yeah, because black's threatening things like knight g3 now. It's not easy. So yeah, I'm not sure there's a clear path to a significant advantage in this whole line. So it's interesting that this line's permitted, because it would have been interesting to see that knight takes c3. It's a long forcing variation. But anyway, black played, he castled. Now knight e1, and it does seem as though the opponent really might not have been aware of the main move here. The main move f5 is overwhelmingly played here in this position to try and keep a lock and key, I believe, on white's center. So white can't easily play for f3 and e4. Well, it'll be a bit delayed. Continuations like this. Okay, if e4 is played here, now you strike with e5, and this is thought to be, I believe this is thought to be okay for black. Black's under a bit of pressure, but it's okay. But in the game, we have this move which might actually be technically a kind of mistake in a way, because what it allows is white to build a nice broad center. The knight clearly can't take here because queen c2, that traps the knight, by the way. So the knight's going back, and white's getting that nice broad center. And although it's double pawns, it is like a strengthening of the d4 square. So we have knight e8, d5 blunts the bishop, and black seems to be running a little bit short of any counterplay in inverted commas. Yeah, black's position is a little bit devoid of counterplay. It's like waiting for white to do stuff. After knight f6, we have a4 as though maybe even a5, a6. So black stops that. Rook a2, yeah, white is able to play moves like this using his space advantage, and Magnus is forming a very, very aggressive pawn structure now, just geared up for checkmating. A pawn structure geared up for checkmating after f4. There's direct attacking ideas now. Even g4, g5, just to dislodge the defensive knight. E takes d. White has to be careful a little bit here not to permit any counterplay. If white played c takes d5, then c4 is annoying. If takes, knight takes e4. If the bishop drops back, then black's getting some play here. It doesn't have to be permitted. Black's actually doing okay there. So no, the correct way is not to undouble the pawns. In fact, that might seem a bit counterintuitive, but it's about the pieces here. It's about the pieces, keeping the pieces locked up, and opens up the bishop, of course, as well to h7, which means now h7 is undermined with g4, in fact, for g5 to try and dislodge that knight. Knight f8 giving the knight a retreat square, but not entirely pleasant looking. Look at this pawn chain. This is geared up for checkmating the opponent's king. Black hasn't got too many squares for his knights. c5 has been taken away from his knight. This other knight's not doing much. It's all pretty passive. It's pretty passive. Just white's just building up and building up now. Knight g4. So ideas like rook g2, and maybe even knight springing to f6 or h6 at some point, or just supporting h6 or other stuff. It's just building up, really. It's brewing here, a storm around black's king. Yep, building up the forces. Very impressive. There's no entry points here. Look at this. With Queen G3, the rookie 1 entry point's been taken away. And it's attacking and defending because G7 then, trying to open up lines. G7 will be exposed, potentially. Yeah, Black's not doing anything now. He's not doing anything. One little move, taking more control over E1 just in case. Black can't even attack this A pawn. You might think this is slightly vulnerable, but it's, yeah, it will take like several moves just to attack the A pawn. Yeah, he's not doing anything. F5. Now there's things like F6 or H6. Black uses the E5 square, but only it's not great after the knight takes. Here, if Black takes with the pawn, he took with the rook. If he takes with the pawn, F6 would really start to break through here horribly. This is just horrible. If takes, then we're either winning the rook or mating on G7 or G8, either. And yeah, it's not pleasant if the rook moves here. This just looks as though White's just smashing through, as at minimum smashing through with things like this. Yeah, so it's not great. So Black plays rook takes, knowing that perhaps bishop f4 is pretty strong, because the rook can't move here without d6 dropping. So Black offers an exchange sack. Actually, Magnus doesn't even have to take this. Guess what he plays? I've given him a clue. Obviously, he doesn't take on e5. 5 seconds. Okay, f6. It's the most incisive move, actually. It's all pretty winning for White by this point. G6. We have HG, FG. On HG, it's just a forced mate, very clear-cut forced mate in 4. Check. Rook H2 is mating. That just delays things, and then we're mating. So FG was played, but now guess what Magnus plays? Okay, bishop takes G6, and the game ended here. It's still like a forced mate virtually after HG check. It's basically a forced mate. The queen's gonna, the most incisive. I mean, there's F7 if nothing else for winning material, and that's probably a forced mate in about 10. But here's about forced mate in 4 or something with Queen H4, because the check coming up and Rook H7. This pawn is also stopping the king using E6, so it's going to be forced mate pretty soon after that. Yeah, that's one example. Yeah, look at that pawn on D5. It's stopping use of E6. Okay, so yeah, pretty much. It seemed like a one-sided game. Theoretically, from a theoretical point of view, after knight e1, yeah, c5 is not really seen much. It's usually f5, as mentioned. So theoretically, I think Black went wrong. But there was an earlier theoretical test with this knight takes c3, bishop f3 line. That would have been quite interesting to see that play out. For my analysis, it seems it's almost an equalish line for Black. It looks scary, but it's almost an equalish line. So an interesting first round game for Magnus. I'm sure he's pleased. Good start, crushing start to the tournament. But there's so many strong teams, which overall average rating across the 4 boards are much higher than Norway. So I don't expect Norway to be doing that great overall, but they've got the star player, Magnus Carlsen. And Ludwig Hammer is not too bad either. I've seen him play at things like the London Classic. He's won it a couple of times, the London Classic Open. Great player as well. But okay, hope you got something from this, and hope you're getting into the atmosphere of the Olympics. You know, there's a lot of media now. You can see the venue, it's nice. You get some media and you get some idea what's going on here in the Olympics, the Chess Olympics. Comments, questions, likes appreciated. Thanks so much.